Welcome to another of the FinTalks series of podcasts organised by FinanceMalta. I'm Vanessa MacDonald and I'm here with Jochen Biedermann, who is the Managing Director of the World Alliance of International Financial Centres. And you may have heard about it because FinanceMalta became a member of the World Alliance, which I think was quite a
number of years ago.
Quite a few years ago. But
by the way, thank you for
having
me.
Over this time, FinanceMalta has played quite an important role,
Definitely.
which I think is very important. Let's start by talking a little bit about the world, and then we'll hone in a little bit on problems or opportunities that are specific to Malta. What I'd like to understand now is where the world stands. It's interesting that you're the World Alliance, because you get a picture from so many jurisdictions, not all of which have the same regulation and legislative frameworks. How have things changed over the last few years?
On one hand, of course, we face more and more impact from geopolitics. I think we cannot ignore this, and it also impacts the financial industry, impacts financial centers, right? So, which goes into the opposite direction of what we want to do as a World Alliance of International Financial Centers. Our focus is to orchestrating the collaboration between financial centers, acknowledging that some compete on a regional scale or internationally, but there are so many more topics which require, this coordinated work across many financial centers. Because financial center, unlike banks and other financial institutions, cannot move. We cannot move somewhere else. FinanceMalta cannot set up a subsidiary in London and then serve the London financial center or Hong Kong. So collaboration is needed because the users of financial services, or at least some of them, work international. So geopolitics, of course, hinders a little bit that collaboration, but we do our best to keep everything up and running. The other impact, and this is not a secret, it's of course digital transformation in various ways, which the financial industry and the financial center faces, right? So from the basic stuff we have seen already up to everything moving real time. Now any customer of financial service, whether retail or institutional, expects things happening immediately. No one is willing to wait one day for money transfer or capital market investment. And then
no matter what the cost in terms of cybersecurity, data protection, all kinds of
this comes on top.
Yes.
And then the third topic, which you can include into the digital transformation, but from my point of view is a separate topic, is artificial intelligence in finance. Not only in finance, impacting all the industries, but will also definitely impact the financial industry, and has started already so, and will, I would say, completely change the financial industry. Thinking more from a consumer point of view, from a user point of view, will offer agents, right, which have access to real-time data and will close the gap between professional investors, for instance, and retail investors, because we will have similar tools available via AI. So creates a level playing field more and makes financial service, access to financial service seamless for all kinds of users.
You were mentioning access to finance, retail investors, institutional investors, but capital markets haven't been the great success that we thought. We've been talking about it at EU level for so long. What's happening?
First, I think we need to differentiate a little bit. If you look, and we've started to look at the world on a global scale, in recent years the US capital market has done very well. Also Hong Kong, if you look at the number of IPOs, Hong Kong is a leader in IPOs worldwide. So some capital markets are doing pretty well. And I'm just talking about the activity. If we look at valuations, I'm astonished to see suddenly individual companies with a valuation of $5 billion, right? So if you would have told this, something like this a few years ago, people would call you crazy, right? So, and this is a little bit a new normal. But looking, and even in Europe, I think you need to differentiate. Let me highlight, for instance, Sweden or the Nordics in general, which have a quite high rate of capital market investments among their population in terms of pension savings, for instance, so have the right instruments. Usually you measure something like the market capitalization versus the GDP, or there are some other factors. In all these measures, Sweden is doing very well. But if you look at continental Europe, a little bit more the south, this includes my home country Germany, but many others, the capital market activity is rather low, and the people tend to save on bank accounts for rather low interest, right? And it's not helpful for their pension savings.
In fact, we did a podcast about the fact that there is so much money in current accounts, deposit accounts, and so on, rather than in investment. So people are a little bit. Is it down to financial literacy? What is the problem?
And then maybe allow me to add. And then this has two implications, and both are negative. First, the people earn less, right? So for pension savings, and then will have less money when they enter pension age. In aging population, which we have in most of Europe, this is a big issue. And second, also there's less capital available for companies, right? So for young companies, startups, growth companies, or even for listed companies. So it's in both ways negative. If you ask me what is the reason for it, I think there are different ways. There are different reasons. One is people tend to be more risk averse. This is a cultural thing. If you ask the average German or French or whatever, right? So maybe, as I said, Sweden maybe an exception, Netherlands also a little bit of an exception, UK is doing a little bit better, but the first ones, they're risk averse. If you go to Asia or so, this looks totally different. People are more willing to take risk and go to the capital markets. And of course, bringing money to the banks is, of course, on a first instant looks a bit safer, but in the long run, as you said, you earn much less. Second, of course, we don't have this harmonized ecosystem, capital markets ecosystem in the European Union yet. There have been many initiatives, the Capital Markets Union, or how it's called now, the Savings and Investment Union, and so on. And then, step by step, some issues were resolved, but still many issues remain, right? So that this creates then a home bias. So Germans tend to invest into German stocks. If they invest, they tend to invest into German stocks, French people into French stocks, and so on and so forth. So it would be better to have, like in the US or China or in other places, a European blue chip board or something like this, and then people would tend to invest into it. But also, if you look at index products like exchange-traded funds or any kinds of investment funds, there's also this bias, unfortunately. And then make it even worse, in many countries in Europe, there are restrictions for insurance companies and other institutional investors invest in too much into equity, or even worse, into startups, right? So they have very strict limitations, so most of the money then goes into government bonds and similar instruments. So we also don't have those large pension funds like you find in the US from teachers or different professions, right, which pool a lot of money, billions of US dollar. We don't have it here, and then those funds invest into the stock market and are driving force to also the increase in stock market valuation. So yeah, and then ultimately there's small things which also differ from country to country. One of them are different insolvency laws, right? So a lot of issues, and my hope, and also the hope of the European financial centers, including FinanceMalta, is that we can resolve those issues much faster than in the last decade.
Well, it's very important that you're a World Alliance as well, because you've got jurisdictions from every corner of the world. So the WAIFC also does a lot of research projects into these things. Can you tell me what you're working on at the moment?
Yeah. We will, on one hand, we are working on the topic of AI in finance. I've done myself a small benchmark study because it's interesting to observe what financial centers are doing together with their governments, of course, in helping AI to, on one hand, to prosper. This is a question starting from talent, AI talent, or talent can help to develop AI, startups, maybe subsidize or support for startups, AI hubs, so places where startups can meet, let's say, with financial institutions and do proof of concepts and so on. Then we see more and more AI data centers worldwide. Unlike this normal data centers, AI data centers have slightly different needs. So you can think of these are different kinds of construction, different installment needed. So there are very large projects worldwide in many billions of euros or US dollars invested into it. For instance, from the large US players, OpenAI, NVIDIA, and so on, Google, and so on and so forth. This is also something financial centers try to attract. But there's also the big topic of responsible AI we are discussing. This is about ethical question of the use of AI, how to make AI understandable, right? So the question, how to safeguard people and business from the impact from a potential adverse impact of AI, right? So
it's also very important to do now,
not
when it's too late.
And then we have the EU AI Act, but you need to break it down into much more detail, right? So so this is one topic we work on, AI, because it's so important. The other topic we will soon start to work on is a project we are just setting up, is the impact of financial centers. Because the financial industry is not there to enjoy itself or to produce a lot of wealthy people by paying large salaries, but the purpose of the financial industry is to serve the people and to serve business, finance people and finance businesses. Very, very clear, right? So this is where it's a utility, or it's a service provider like many other service industries servicing other industries. And then
it's a good existential question, because nowadays when everybody's talking about sustainability, it's also a very low impact sector.
Yeah. In terms of sustainability, it's very, very clear. The role of the financial industry in sustainability is twofold. On one hand, financing green, and on the other hand, greening finance. Financing green is obvious, providing the capital for the net zero transition, helping companies, helping the government to change, right? So, and greening finance is making financial products more green. First, make it transparent. What is, if you buy an investment fund, what is inside, how green it is, and then nudging or trying to produce greener financial products or green financial products. So this is a task for sustainability. But the impact of the financial industry or financial centers, of course, they are also very basic things. It's a contribution to the GDP, of course. It's a financing function I've mentioned, but impact is also workforce. Interestingly, there are measures in financial centers that for one employee in the financial sector, let's say at a financial institution like a bank, there are 6 or 7 others in professional services and so on and so forth.
So when we talk about an ecosystem, that's quite something,
right?
yes.
So means if you create one job in the financial industry, basically a country might see 6 or 7 jobs created, right? So and then the financial industry is paying decent salaries, so this is also, of course, important. For emerging financial centers,
It's also about attracting foreign direct investment or in general investment into the countries, maybe in green bonds to finance the energy transition, as I've mentioned. Some countries bank a lot on startups. It's very important for them to create very attractive startup ecosystems. Here Malta is also famous for its startup ecosystem. So what we argue as a World Alliance, or what will we argue is there's no one size fits all. It's some sort of implicit agreement between the government, the people, and the financial industry in a country, what the financial industry should do, right? So, as I said, it's more increasing the GDP, the workforce, the FDIs, whatever, fostering innovation. You might say, of course, should do all, but in some place you have limited resources, you have limited talent. Maybe you cannot do all at the same speed, right? So. And then you need to look at what is most important for the country.
Limited talent in terms of restriction is certainly something that we know all about in Malta. Can you tell me a little bit about Malta, though, as a financial centre now? I think last year's figures were that financial services are about 8.4% of our GDP, but obviously it's something which has comparatively less impact than tourism and a lot of the other sectors that we are involved in. We also have, as you know, a strategy for financial services.
I know.
So we've got everything in place, we've got a strategy, we have a government with Vision 50-50. What?
I think
how far can we go?
I think this is all perfect and this is all fine. And the 8% you've mentioned is on the higher end. Luxembourg is even higher if you look at the percentage of the financial industry versus all industries, but it's on the higher end. Countries like France, Germany, and so on are usually maybe 3-4% if I'm not mistaken, right? So it's an important sector for Malta. Besides what you've mentioned, Malta has always had very excellent professional services. This is one of the core strengths of Malta, which are flexible, can work with all stakeholders very well. Of course, it's in the nature of Malta within the European Union that Malta needs to act fast, maybe be faster, more flexible, more agile than larger member states, right? But this is common sense. This is not only in the financial industry, right? So, Malta in the past was fast in coming up with new legislation, new regulation for things which haven't been regulated yet in the European Union. Think about crypto, digital assets, and so on and so forth. Of course. But of course, at some point in time, the rest will catch up. And now for these things, we have regulation with MiCA for crypto and digital assets, for instance. So Malta always need to innovate, right? So to have a little bit of a head start, right? So this is. It
helps us with brand recognition and market share.
And then there are other member states which following the same way. We look at the Baltic countries and so on, Ireland. I've mentioned Luxembourg. So some other countries also want to innovate and be the first one. So it's a competition among them, right? So Malta is of course leveraging the EU regime with passporting and so on and so forth. Have access to everything. So you need to be agile in that respect. Talent you have mentioned, of course. On one hand, here in Malta, you benefit from being a very attractive destination. Always a combination of tourism. Tourism already signals it's not the worst place, right? So if the tourists come, so also maybe people want to stay here and work, for instance, in the financial industry. So it's possible to attract talent. But on the other hand, the space is limited, right? So this is a downside, right? So. This is why usually financial centers in that situation specialize. They cannot do everything because of limited talent, so they specialize on those areas where they have most of the impact, right? So, and I've mentioned, for instance, crypto, digital assets, but there's also cybersecurity and then a few other specializations.
And of course, one area where Malta can excel, and this is not the first time I've mentioned, is the blue economy, right? So now we are looking very much on carbon, on fighting climate change and so on. But in terms of sustainability, we have a lot of issues, right? So, and many of them involve the sea, right? So this is something...
Being in the middle of the Mediterranean,
yeah,
we're in
this is something we also need to we need to sort it out, right? So maybe climate looks a little bit more urgent, but there's a circular economy, right? So we don't have endless resources, also not here in Malta, right? So, so I think there are opportunities. The strategy is right. You just need to execute, stay agile, resilient, keep going, right? So I don't see much issues, but of course Malta needs to acknowledge there are some limitations, right?
What about climate change? Is that going to make the blue economy even more important?
I think climate change, yes.
Because we always see it in terms of the green economy, but not necessarily in terms of the blue one.
But of course there are many other issues, right? So it's the pollution of the ocean, not talking about plastics and microplastic and so on. But it's also using the sea, right? So in a sustainable way, right? So many parts of the sea we haven't explored yet. And where exploration is active, I'm not an expert for this, but at least it doesn't look very sustainable. If you have large instruments and then taking the soil from the sea because there might be some minerals or rare earths or whatever inside, and then at the end looks a little bit like destruction. So I think these are all topics we have to deal with. And this needs to finance, like everything needs to be financed, right? There needs to be expertise built up. One of our members is Busan in South Korea, and they have set up many years ago an institute for maritime, including the financing aspects of it. So they are they have one of the largest harbors worldwide, shipyards, and other industries related to maritime. They have banks financing, trade finance, supply chain, logistics, and so on and so forth. And they have similar issues. And they have set up this institute quite successfully in marrying a little bit the financing part with the, let's say, more practical part of the maritime industry. So, yeah, I see many opportunities.
Very interesting case study. Jochen, what can I say to you? Thank you so much for being with us.
It was my pleasure.
You've given us an awful lot to think about.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I keep the fingers crossed for Malta.
Indeed.
As I will for all our members, but for Malta especially.
Indeed.
Thank you very much for having me.